Senator Lott, Senator Stevens, Senator Inouye, others on the committee of long experience on this committee, editorial comment across the country, countless numbers of organizations, countless numbers of witnesses have all objected to the way the FCC is about to proceed, Mr. Chairman. We have actually passed out of this committee a request to have an extended period of time now to try to complete the localism and diversity issues before you consolidate. Now, you know, who is it who created the FCC, Mr. Chairman?
Congress did.
And Congress created the FCC for what purpose?
To regulate the telecommunications and media areas.
In the interests of the American people.
In the public interest, yes.
Correct. For their safety, security, and for other purposes, correct?
That's correct.
And the Congress has expressed its will here with respect to this Commission's potential action, has it not?
This committee has passed a bill out of the committee that says that there should be a new process put in place for our media ownership reviews.
And you are hearing from a bipartisan chorus, are you not?
Congress also expressed its will in 1996, where they required us to undergo a biannual review of our media ownership rules and to make any changes in those rules that we find when we find those rules are no longer necessary. So there's also been that part that we have an obligation to do as well.
But nowhere in the FCC rules, either in 1934 or in 1996, is there anything that suggests that you have a rationale or a motivation to make a decision that saves newspapers? I mean, you've come into this committee today, and the first part of your testimony was an articulation of the trouble the newspapers are in. Can you show me? I mean, I went back and looked at it. Can you show me here where there's any mention of the word newspapers? In 96 or 34?
I think we have an obligation to understand what the impact of some of our rules have on the industries that we regulate, including when we put in place the rules back in 1970 and the 1970s that prohibited a newspaper from purchasing a broadcast property, the impact that may have had inadvertently on newspapers.
But the purpose of that was not with respect to the regulation of the newspaper. The purpose of that was with respect to the consolidation of power in the dissemination of information.
I think that's right, and that's the reason why.
Well, what does that have to do with people being fired or with loss of reporters or with the economics of the newspaper?
I think it's also in making sure that the local news gathering is occurring and robust, and I actually think that the Commission has an obligation to understand what the impact of its rules are. And I think in this instance, we do have an obligation to make sure and balance the importance of independent voices in the local community, which the Commission has under its precedent traditionally looked at being beyond just the broadcasters, but also the newspapers and other independent voices.
Well, let's get to that. If that's true, and that is your obligation, and I believe it is part of it, but it doesn't go to the question of cross-ownership. The question of cross-ownership is to fulfill the larger obligation of the FCC to protect the sourcing of information to the American people so that you don't have a concentration of power. Now, data in the official FCC record, particularly gathered from the 2000 Section 257 studies, indicates that the primary factors influencing female and minority broadcast ownership are media market concentration, access to capital and equity, and access to deals. And as the markets become more concentrated, the cost of stations as acquisition targets become artificially inflated, driving away potential new entrants in favor of existing large chains. So in effect, the concentration has the effect of diminishing the ability of smaller and single station owners to compete for advertising and programming contracts. So you're in the middle of an analysis of this, the diversity and the localism. And notwithstanding that your responsibility is to the public to make sure that diversity and localism are well served, you're about to make a decision for no absolutely understandable rationale and against the will of Congress and of most of the witnesses to actually increase the concentration, which will make worse the localism and diversity issues without even having completed those studies. So my question to you is, why would you not? Would you agree today, in the face of those realities and many more? I can go on about what happens to the concentration and diversity. Would you agree with the opinion expressed from Senator Lott, Senator Stevens, the chairman, Senator Rockefeller, and others, to postpone this decision from several days from now and allow these next days to take place and complete the diversity and complete the localism analysis? Would you agree to that?
No, and if I can respond, I'm not sure I agree with some of the other statements that were made in the beginning before you got up to the question as well.
Well, what is so compelling? What is so compelling that you have to move in several days?
If I can respond, I think that there's several concerns that I would end up having with some of the statements you've made. First of all, in characterizing the overall consolidation that it may or may not have that may have occurred since the 1996 Telecommunications Act was put in place, no, we're not actually lifting any of those other rules as far as allowing any other further consolidation on radio, on television, at the national or the local level.
I know that. I know what you're doing. You've got 20 cities that you're targeted, but you also have a waiver process in here, and that waiver process would allow you to make any kind of political decision you want with respect to the waiver.
The Commission has always had a waiver process. People can always come in with a waiver. Indeed, I think it's actually tightening it, and some of the comments that were filed in response to what I put out actually said that the waiver process with a presumption against granting waivers is a tighter standard than we currently have when a waiver is provided.
What do you say to that, Commissioner Cox?
I don't think we even have something that would qualify for the term of waiver. This is just overcoming a finding with some very loose criteria. Is there financial distress? That's undefined. Will there be more local news produced? Is that 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes? So it's just so porous as to be, I think, meaningless.
What do you say to that, Commissioner Edison?
I would agree. I mean, another one of the conditions is financial condition. What does that mean? There's no definition in terms of what level of concentration in a market wouldn't be allowed. There's no quantifiable standards anywhere. So 3 commissioners at will could do a waiver in any market, no matter how small, including Jackson, Mississippi, or anywhere in West Virginia or Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. I think it opens the door everywhere. We need to tighten those standards.
Commissioner Martin, what I quoted to you in terms of what happens to the concentration of the market is, in fact, the official FCC record, which you're choosing to ignore.
No, we're not ignoring. I think that there's no question about the concentration that has occurred makes it more difficult for small businesses, including minorities and women, to be able to be active and involved in the media ownership.
So why would you not want to wait till you understand the impact better of the diversity and localism analysis? What is so compelling in the face of all of the other imperatives of communications in America to move several days from now rather than 180 days from now, 90 days from now?
We have not just proposed to change the newspaper broadcast cross-ownership rule. I have also put forth proposals that would address both the localism study that this Congress has been encouraging us to complete, and on the minority ownership proceeding, including adopting many of the recommendations that were put forth by our own diversity committee.
But you realize the fundamental rationale that you gave when you came in here was the dilemma that newspapers have faced, which incidentally a lot of people would contest. A lot of people would say that all across this country, newspapers are making lots of money, doing quite well. They've had to retrench somewhat. Yes, they've had to adjust. But as in any business, they're finding their outlets and means of making money. In fact, one of the most profitable entities in America today are some of these small newspapers in cities and towns across America, which are cash cows.
I think that the newspaper industry is having a significant difficult time in continuing some of its local news gathering.
But where is it in your jurisdiction under the FCC to put that ahead of the interest of diversity and localism and to deal with the problem of concentration?